Now, what we get into here is by, 35% of brands will openly incentivize consumers to share personal data in exchange for cash rewards. I don't know if you realize this, but this is already happening. I would suggest you go out and you look at something called the Brave browser. And they have what's called BAT. Now, Brave browser is very similar to like the Firefox browser, things like that, like Chrome, like the other browsers out there. But what the Brave browser does is based upon where you pay your attention as a consumer, they give you what's called basic attention tokens, BATs, which is essentially a type of cryptocurrency. It's a blockchain-enabled type of cryptocurrency that you then get value that you can spend on different things. I'm already seeing this in other places where, you see some of these, I guess I would call them influencers or artists or musicians, Linkin Park, bands like that are going out and creating their own cryptocurrencies on, for example, the Rally platform that, then they can interact and they get it, if they pay attention to that band, then the consumer gets something and then they're able to give something back to the band. So this is already happening. I'll be honest, it's edge right now. It's not happening right in a large scale yet, but it's at the edge and we're beginning to see these new trends come through. And so what is this going to mean then for companies that want to move in this direction? How are you going to pay for data? Well, first of all is, from the IT side, you really have to look at your data collection. Data privacy and consent management are fundamental, to what's going on out there. And so, any organization that's going to leverage that customer data, they've really got to think through, what is the data privacy, what's the consent, how's this work, oh gosh, can't think of it. I just lost the European Data Privacy Act. But that's something that companies really need to take into account. The other thing is that you need to remember that, and one of my colleagues is going to love this, is that it's IT's role to ensure that transparent data procedures are in place, because that's what's going to engender customer trust. I talked about empathy. I talked about, making that connection. I talked about engagement. I talked about that all context array. But the other component of this is customer trust. Without trust, you don't have anything. So IT needs to ensure that. This is really IT's role. Lastly, IT is going to have to partner with the business stakeholders to really map out the infrastructure, the data feeds, the systems, everything out there. It's going to be required to collect and manage that customer data that the customer consents to them collecting. And then it's also going to fall on them, believe it or not, to establish the appropriate reward mechanisms. Maybe not the reward levels, how much a customer gets for doing this, but what's the mechanism for getting it to them? What does that what we used to call loyalty management system, what does that look like in this new world? So what I'll leave you with on this is, it's really around getting that customer feedback on what your customers prefer for data collection and associated, what associated rewards they want. Whether it's like my American Express card where I get so much cash back every year, or Discover, or whether it's tokens that I can use for blockchain or something else like that, what is the reward? And then be transparent with your customers, what you're doing and what the ratio is and what this looks like. Because that's what's going to engender that trust, and that's what's going to drive loyalty. If you don't have partnerships already, begin to look at partnerships with organizations that provide that data collection platform. I've already given you the example of the Brave browser. And especially if you don't have your own internal capabilities. My guess is within 5 to 7 years, every company, well, I shouldn't say every, most companies are going to develop their own internal capabilities, but they're going to merge those or match those with external capabilities that are already out there. And then lastly, you really have to develop some new metrics, some new KPIs that's associated with the data capitalization. What we're talking about here is that return on data-related investments. For every piece of data that we collect about the customer, how can we tie that back to bottom line revenue? What does that look like? And honestly, in a lot of companies, that's going to require some structural changes to their business processes in order to be able to make that work. Might even actually, cause some actual structural organizational changes. but at least business process changes.